Willingness. Prophets, leaders, teachers, and certain organizations provide us with a framework in which to work. In some instances, we get caught up on the personality of the person bringing the message to such a degree that we miss the framework of principles being offered. You can become so dependent on the messenger that the message is lost. In most cases, that is not the goal of the messenger. In high school, for example, students rarely say, "Mr. Jones is a wonderful algebra teacher. He explains those equations so divinely, let's worship him." Yet, when the matter is social, political, or spiritual, there's always the challenge of not losing sight of the teachings to enshrine the teacher. Let me repeat that. Yet, when the matter is social, political, or spiritual, there's always the challenge of not losing sight of the teachings to enshrine the teacher. When this happens, the absence of the teacher often leads to loss of message. No amount of information can help you until you are ready to receive it and apply it to your daily living. This readiness is sometimes called self-realization. Readiness to accept information and embrace practices leading to spiritual and personal transformation is what I refer to as willingness. When I told a friend of mine that I was writing a book to give black men insight into the process of spiritual transformation, he said, "Good. You're preparing lunch?" I asked him what he meant. He explained that providing a process and the principles by which to employ the process is like making lunch for a man going off to work. He cautioned me, however, that unless the men are willing to go to work, there's no need to prepare the lunch. Transformation of the mind to spiritual consciousness takes a great deal of work. It is work the individual must be willing to perform. Black men must be willing to examine themselves, tell the truth about what you see, make a conscious decision to change, and be committed to take those actions that will facilitate the change. Some will say, "I don't know what to do." That's where the process comes in. Willingness to employ the steps of the process in every aspect of your life will result in ability. You must first recognize the need to change. It does not necessarily imply that there's anything wrong with the way you are. It means you are willing to do better and be better at whatever it is that you do. With recognition comes the desire. You may know you can do better, but for lack of desire. Perhaps you have made yourself comfortable where you are. You may have convinced yourself that this is as good as it gets. In your case, the lack of desire will retard the transformation process. If the desire is present, you must make a decision. You must decide that no matter what anyone says or does, you are committed to undertake a course of action that will ultimately result in mental, emotional, and spiritual evolution. You must decide that your spiritual health, emotional well-being, and physical advancement are a priority in your life. This decision requires discipline. One of the major challenges, One of the major challenges I faced on my own spiritual journey was discipline. To do certain things in a particular way consistently, even when I could not see the results immediately, was a challenge. Whether it was a prayer, meditation, reading, or training my mind to think a new way and my mouth to speak a new way, it was quite difficult. I was willing, but I was also undisciplined. It was so much easier to struggle along, living on the edge, putting out fires as they presented themselves, than to spend 15 minutes a day in quiet contemplation. I bought the books, I listened to the tapes, I attended the workshops. When I got home, got on the telephone with my girlfriends, and complained about how miserably life was treating me. It was not until the desire and decision were laced with discipline that I became consciously willing to do what was necessary. When I became willing to do it and stick to it, I reaped benefits from the daily practices. I also saw evidence of the principles manifesting as tangible conditions in my life. The process, principles, books, and tapes were merely props. Every stage production needs props. Props help to create the set and the scenes. The props, in and of themselves, do not make the play. The success or failure of any production is determined by the work that goes on behind the scenes, the direction, the rehearsals, and ultimately, the performance of the artist on stage. If the producers, directors, set designers, and artists are not willing to do the arduous, time-consuming work in a disciplined manner, the best props in the world will not sustain the production. The journey towards spiritual evolution is a lifetime production. There will be many props to hold, help, and pick you up. In the end, the ability to produce in life that which you have studied and rehearsed will be a reflection of the degree of discipline you exert. You will need to be willing to practice the principles. You must believe that the principles will work for you. You must believe that the principles will work for you. You must employ the principles with due diligence. Awareness. Feelings lead to awareness. Pause. Okay, sorry about that, but I just want you to know that pause happened at 4:44, if that's important to anyone. This is about foundations. Okay, so let's finish this up. Feelings lead to awareness. You are not aware that your shoes are too small until you feel the pinch on your toes. How many times have you thought to yourself that your life is not the way you want it to be? Have you ever asked yourself, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with what I do? Something in your experience brought you to the awareness, the feeling that something was not quite right. Something in your experience brought you to the awareness, the feeling that something was not quite right. The first step of the spiritual transformation process is to become aware. You must be aware of the spirit that lives within you. You must be aware of the truth that spirit holds and the truth that surrounds you. You must be aware of the role that spirit and spiritual practices play in your life. The truth is, no degree of racism, capitalism, oppression, or disparity can alter the inherent power of God-likeness locked within your spirit. Throughout life, physical experiences and conditions can alter your state of being by affecting what you believe. The alteration affects your ability to grasp and grapple with physical experiences. The physical senses communicate experiences to your brain. If the brain utilizes only its physical capabilities, it will translate all experiences into physical terms. To utilize spiritual qualities, the brain must be spiritualized. It must be filled with information of a spiritual nature. Because men are dominated by the thought process, you tend to think in concrete terms. The spiritual impotence of physical experiences cannot be seen. The spirit is not tangible. As a result, you can become locked into the physical perception of your experiences and remain unaware of the spiritual purpose or significance. In order to change your mind and shift into awareness of spirit, you must be willing to know the truth and seek the truth about yourself. This will require a willingness to examine every experience from an internal frame of reference. In the midst of an experience, you must ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? In doing so, you become aware of your own internal mechanisms that turn you on and off. The next step is to examine your feelings. When have I felt this way before? Under what circumstances? Who was involved? To your intellect, this will seem like an endless or useless exercise of internal chatter. Again, to your intellect, this will seem like an endless or useless exercise of internal chatter. And once you get the hang of it, through consistent, disciplined practice, it will take you only a matter of seconds to become aware of what you are feeling and experiencing. Remember, belief and trust are key in the process of becoming aware. The truth is, nothing people say about you can hurt or harm you. People push your buttons because you are not aware of what you are feeling or remembering. Why do you respond to people, events, and situations the way you do? It's because of the past. Because of things that you experienced yesterday or yesteryear. She reminds you of someone who treated you badly. He talks to you in the way your so-and-so did. You know that person has angered, insulted, hurt you in some way by what he or she did or said. Unfortunately, you are unaware of the reasons. It's not the other person. It is you responding to your old stuff to which you are completely unaware. What the other person did was touch a sore spot, open an old wound, push a button that you were not aware existed. Now comes the challenging part. Ask yourself, what did I do? How did I contribute to this situation? What was I thinking? What was I feeling when I entered this experience? We all have patterns of thoughts, emotions, and behavior that are locked into our subconscious mind. We all have patterns of thought, emotions, and behavior that are locked into our subconscious mind will attract experiences to reflect what we believe within ourselves. In the process of becoming aware, you must be willing to examine what you do and why you do it. Without guilt, shame, or blame, your goal must be to become aware so that you can make a new, better, more conscious, enlightened, and productive choice. At all times, you have the ability and right to choose what you will think and how you will respond. Awareness enhances that ability and gives you the right. As human beings, we adjust our beliefs and ideas to accommodate the interpretation of our physical experiences. The situations and conditions in which we live are translated by the process of logical thinking. If I do this, then this will happen. We believe we know what will happen because we have seen it happen before, or we have heard of it happening in some other situation. We think in terms of the natural outcome of the physical input. We also think in terms of what will bring the least amount of discomfort or pain to the physical or mental self. These conclusions, all grounded in the physical realm, are based on physical experiences. These conclusions, all grounded in the physical realm, are based on physical experiences and the inherent desire to protect the physical body. Until we become spiritually inclined to trust spiritual principles, we remain unaware that every experience happens twice. First, inside, within our consciousness, then outside in our world. As long as we are thinking about it, ducking around and dodging the unpleasant physical experiences we perceive to be lurking around every corner, we are powerless. Our real power lies within the self, the Spirit of God within our being, which always has our best interest and protection in mind. Acknowledgement. You can be fully aware of something and fail to acknowledge it. Alcohol and substance abusers are prime examples. They may know they cannot get through the day without a drink or a snort, hit, shot of drugs, yet they fail to acknowledge that they are addicted. Yet they fail to acknowledge that they are addicted. Acknowledgement means being in a state of recognition of what you are thinking or feeling. It is the way in which you honor and support your right to be and feel. Acknowledgement is recognition of truth. That truth may be painful or frightening. However, it is the path to your emotional freedom and spiritual evolution. Men are taught it is not manly to be afraid, to demonstrate weakness or emotion. Yet, certain emotions will weaken your physical being. Vulnerability, fear, guilt, shame, resentment, or anger, when not acknowledged, will weaken your ability to perceive, respond, and make conscious choices. When certain emotions erupt within your being, you have been taught to deny them. You fail to acknowledge what you feel. The masculine nature is to reach or strike outwardly. Blame others for what they made you do. Look to someone else as the cause of your response or experience. It is only when you are willing to admit that the feeling exists and that you have a right to experience it that will be... Okay, let me do that again. It is only when you are willing to admit that the feeling exists and that you have a right to experience it that you will be empowered and choose what to do. Emotions result from experiences. Experiences are temporary. They cannot and do not change who and what you are at the core of your being. Acknowledging what you feel is the first step. Acknowledging what you do is the next step. It is almost impossible for any human being to always do or say the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. There are those times, regardless of how rare they may be, that you will act up or act out in the most inappropriate manner. When you do, acknowledge it. Honor yourself. It was a temporary experience. There's nothing to be ashamed of or guilty about. However, if you fail or refuse to acknowledge inappropriate behavior or actions, they become anchors around your neck. Let me repeat that. However, if you fail or refuse to acknowledge inappropriate behaviors or actions, they become anchors around your neck. They weigh you down and hold you back. You'll be angry with other people. You'll blame them for what you have done. The ego will find a way, some way, to rationalize your behavior. That is very dangerous. When you fail to acknowledge your own shortcomings, you set yourself up to be a victim. You give away your power. Once you acknowledge what you have done, how you have responded, you become aware of your behavior that may not be productive. When you acknowledge that your behavior, your approach, your way of thinking or acting out of your emotional experience is not reaping the results you desire, you are once again empowered to choose. You have opened yourself up to be healed. Acceptance. At the core of every human being is an intangible and indestructible power or force that sustains life. That power is the spark of divinity called spirit. Spirit is the universal life, sustained by breath, that remains at all times connected to the source of life. God, Jah, Allah, Amin-Ra, Olodumare. Every living creature breathes. Every breathing creature has a spirit. It is not the physical characteristics that make it godlike, but rather the nature, the potential power lodged in the spirit, which comes forth through conscious acceptance of his presence. In every culture, there are praise names for God, the Creator, Divine Mind, the One Life, the All-Knowing, the Almighty. These praise names identify and represent the hidden attributes associated with the nature and energy known as God. Acknowledgement of these attributes, combined with the practice of certain human virtues, will elevate the consciousness and ultimately enable the average person to live these attributes. All human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. This means that everyone has the same ability and opportunity to bring forth his or her spiritual nature. Peace, strength, freedom, understanding, total well-being, joy, and love are potentials of God inherent in every human being. Peace, strength, freedom, understanding, total well-being, joy, and love are the potentials of God inherent in every human being. These attributes are our divine birthright. They cannot be infringed upon or taken away by another human being. The challenges you face are accepting that you possess these attributes, recognizing that they are always actively available to you, and incorporating into your life those activities that will activate those attributes in your spirit mind. The challenges you face are accepting that you possess these attributes, recognizing that they are always actively available to you, and incorporating into your life those activities that will activate these attributes in your spirit and mind. How do you live the benefits of these attributes as you move along among other human beings? How do you live the benefits of these attributes as you move among other human beings? You must acknowledge that you are already present. Unfortunately, you are socially conditioned to look for and expect the benefits to come from other people and the world. Acceptance is embracing the true spirit and spiritual principles. When you embrace the truth, you are released from psychological and emotional turmoil. Whether the truth is of a personal nature or related to spiritual principles, accepting it eliminates the need to fix it or to fix things to suit your needs. Acceptance also relates to a willingness to acknowledge that Acceptance also relates to a willingness to acknowledge the intangible presence of spirit and the truth of spiritual principles. It results in an inner knowing that all is well, in divine order, even when there is no evidence of the same in the physical world. Acceptance is the ability to transcend judgment of right and wrong and the toxic emotions of fear, anger, shame, and guilt. When you accept the truth, you know that the truth of spirit will prevail and reveal itself as physical circumstances for the good of all involved. Acceptance means being willing to surrender the tangible results for belief in the intangible cause, to relinquish the known facts and trust that the unknown principles of spirit are always active. Confession. It is frightening to admit to yourself or anyone else that you've made a mistake, a poor choice, a bad decision, or that you have behaved irresponsibly. When you do that, you open yourself up to attack, criticism, condemnation, or abandonment. It's a humiliating experience to admit to someone that you are helpless or clueless. Yet it is only through a humble spirit that the light of spirit can enter. Confession opens the doors of your mind to spiritual light and moral strength. There are two very positive aspects of confession. It frees the mind of guilt, which in turn disarms defense mechanisms. When you have no guilt, your self-esteem is enhanced. When you have no need to defend yourself, you have little cause to be angry. Confession also disarms the adversary. When you point out your own weaknesses, shortcomings, and human frailties, they can't be used against you. People cannot hit you over the head with your own bat unless you let them. There are three distinctive levels of confession: confession to self, confession to God, and confession to others. Confession to self is recognition that you have the right to make mistakes. Whatever you do is based on who you are, where you come from, and the information you have at the time of the action. When you get more information, better information, you will make better choices and take more constructive action. In the meantime, you may step on people's toes. When you do, confess it to yourself. Give yourself the opportunity to grow up by giving up the need to be right. Once you confess to yourself, you can forgive yourself. Once you forgive yourself, you open the channels of communication and enlightenment that can bring new information that leads to spiritual growth. Confession to God is a plea for healing. Until you admit that you can be better and want to be better, you cannot be healed. Healing is synonymous with wholeness, happiness, and a state of well-being. Confession is a sign of your willingness to be corrected. When you confess to God, it is voluntary submission. It is an admission of spiritual helplessness. It is recognition that your way is not working, is not bringing you the results you desire. When I confess to God, I usually say something like, "Help, I've messed up, and I haven't got a clue about what to do next. You got it, God? I'm getting out of your way." At that point, I stop worrying or being angry and trying to get my way. Miraculously, I find the strength and presence of mind to do whatever comes up next. Usually, it's accepting the truth about myself and what I have been doing. There are times when you will not be required to confess to anyone except yourself and God. This is not the case most of the time. Because we're all connected, everything we do affects everyone around us. We're like crayons in a box. If you shift one crayon, every crayon in the box is affected. The challenge of being able to confess what you have done to others arises when you begin to judge what you have done right or wrong. In spiritual principle, there is no right or wrong. People do what they do. That makes it real. People may not like what you do. You may not be proud of what you do. More often than not, you acted in fear and confusion or without enough information. You may have felt desperate or alone and you panicked. That's not wrong. That's human. When you confess what you have done and what you are experiencing at the time you acted, you are acknowledging that you are human. People can choose not to understand. They will probably be on high viscosity. Don't worry. They will eventually get over it. You must be willing, however, to take that risk. There is one thing you can rely on. Even if your mother or wife puts you out or your best friend stops speaking to you. God knows he can't kill the kids when he messed up. God knows he can't kill the kids when they mess up. Surrender. The cavalry is coming over the hill. They have horses. They have guns. They have fierceness in their eyes, hate in their hearts, and they are being led by a colonel who wants to become a general. They are moving in for the kill. The natives are at the bottom of the hill. They have women and children who are running and screaming at the sight of the cavalry. They have bows and arrows and a few pots and pans. They have flammable teepees. They have some rusty hunting knives. They also have pride and fierce tenacity. The cavalry encroaches upon the natives' homestead. The cavalry encroaches upon the natives' homestead, killing the elderly and some women and children. The young warriors fight back with all their might. The cavalry is relentless. The warriors eventually head for the hills. After a few days, weeks, or months of hunger and thirst, with no way around the cavalry, the natives surrender. They give up. They're alive, but they are humiliated. In a spiritual context, surrender is not synonymous with being overpowered, defeated, or humiliated. It is an act of faith. Surrender is the process of giving up your will to the will of God. It is an admission that you are willing to try a new way, do a new thing. Surrender is acknowledgement of natural law, spiritual principle, and God's way. It is a state of mind that leads to an experience of peace and well-being. When you can no longer do and admit it, surrender is another way of acknowledging and accepting the omnipresence of Spirit. Because you cannot do does not mean it will not be done. Surrender sets your faith into action. It shifts the focus from doing to being. The Bible offers a wonderful parable about the acts of surrender. When a wheat farmer plants his seeds in the field, he then surrenders. He relies in faith that the seeds will root, sprout, and grow. Once the wheat grows, he must harvest the crop and separate the wheat from the chaff. Then, when the wheat is removed, the field is left full of stubs and weeds. The farmer now has a great deal of work to do. However, he surrenders. He stays focused on the wheat. He goes home and waits for his wife to bake some wheat bread without lamenting about the condition of his field and all the hard work that lies ahead of him. In surrender, he knows that the work will get done, even when he does not know when or by whom. Surrender happens when you can stand in the middle of all of the crap in your life and be okay with it. The crap is there, smelling very bad, but you are not in fear, resentment, or humiliation. At the basic level, surrender is an admission that you haven't got a clue about what to do or what is coming. It is the prelude to confession. It means that you are willing to stop pretending that you don't know what you want. You always know what you want. However, in view of what you have been taught to believe about surrender, it's safer to pretend that you don't know. Without surrender in a relationship, for example, you're forced to play the cat and mouse game. You love her, she loves you. You both are afraid to admit it. That would mean surrender. Instead, you resist the attraction. You fight against what you feel and against each other in fear of looking weak or being humiliated. Surrendering to your emotions in a relationship would mean taking a risk. It would play out by you saying, okay, let's do this. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's go for it. Surrender will often take you into emotionally and sometimes physically unfamiliar territory. That's where your faith comes in. You may not be consciously aware of what will happen, but your spirit knows. Once you surrender, you remove the resistance. Resistance causes pain. When you make the shift from pain to surrender, you come into alignment with Spirit. You provide Spirit with the energy needed to work on your behalf, teach you some valuable lessons, and support your spiritual evolution. Because so many black men believe that they have had few personal victories in their lives, surrendering to spirit becomes a major challenge. This, coupled with the images that surrender conjures in your mind, makes it a very unattractive option. Surrender is an act of courage and power that creates a shift in the consciousness. Let me say that again. Surrender is an act of courage and power that creates a shift in the consciousness. From being a disempowered human being struggling to make a way, to being a child of God, entitled to the best. Surrender of the ego and will to the will of spirit as an acknowledgement that you are a part of God's creation. God's will for the good. God's will is for the good of all its creation. Surrender is acceptance that we are all connected, and that if one person selfishly holds out, it will affect everyone else. When you choose a way that's not in alignment with God's will, you run the risk of pissing somebody off. Ashe. Okay, brothers. Thank you so much for allowing me to bring you these words from The Spirit of the Man, A Vision of Transformation for Black Men and the Women Who Love Them by IYANLA VANZANT. Thank you for allowing me to narrate them and to bring you these powerful messages, these words of encouragement and enlightenment. So don't forget to share these messages with other brothers and sisters, and I will be talking to you again very soon. Thank you. Ashe. Namaste. Peace.